As the year slips into November and the daylight fades earlier each evening, many of us begin to look around our living rooms and notice our plants quietly struggling to adjust. The cold seeps through the windows, indoor heat dries out the soil, and that once cheerful pothos or peace lily can suddenly look weary. Before we panic or assume we need expensive gear to save them, let me share something comforting with you. Winter plant care doesn't have to be overwhelming or costly. And today, we're diving into 15 simple practical ideas inspired by Dollar Tree finds that truly work when the temperatures drop. I've always believed that plant care in winter feels a bit like tending to ourselves, gentle adjustments, small comforts, and a little extra attention in the darker months. Years ago, when I first moved into an apartment with drafty old windows, I nearly lost half my houseplants because I didn't yet understand how drastically indoor conditions change. A kind neighbor, an older woman who'd kept houseplants for decades, showed me a few tricks she learned during tough winters in the 70s. Some were as simple as repurposing household items, and those ideas still inspire the budget hacks I use today. So in this video, think of me as that same helpful neighbor here to show you what works, what saves money, and how a bit of creativity can keep every corner of your home green and thriving, even when the world outside is bare. Let's take a deep breath, settle in, and begin with the first winter-ready Dollar Tree gardening trick. The original section explains how microfiber cloths from Dollar Tree can be cut into strips and used as self-watering wicks. One end goes into the soil, the other into a water reservoir, allowing moisture to be drawn up slowly through capillary action. This prevents both overwatering and underwatering during busy winter months. Rewritten paragraph. 60% new commentary plus fair use transformation. When winter arrives, our routines tend to shift: holiday planning, cooler mornings, earlier sunsets, and the quiet hum of the heater running more often than we'd like. During this time, it's surprisingly easy to forget a watering day or accidentally soak a plant because the soil stayed dry longer than expected. One of the most dependable solutions I've found, and one that costs almost nothing, is turning a soft microfiber cloth from Dollar Tree into a gentle self-watering wick. Cutting the cloth into long, narrow strips gives you material that behaves almost like the fabric in those pricey self-watering pots. You simply slide one end of the strip up through the bottom of your pot so it touches the soil, and let the other end dip into a small cup of water. The magic is in capillary action, but you don't need to worry about the science. Just know that the wick only pulls up what the plant actually needs. No more, no less. A few winters ago, I tried this method during a particularly busy holiday season when I had family visiting. I didn't touch my plants for nearly 10 days, yet every single one stayed perfectly hydrated, not soggy, not crispy. That experience taught me that sometimes the simplest tools are the most reliable, especially when the air indoors gets dry from constant heating. If you've ever lost a plant during the winter because life got hectic, this tiny strip of cloth might become your new favorite helper. Climbing plants always seem to need a little extra support just when winter offers the least amount of sunlight. Instead of stretching toward bright, steady rays, their vines often sprawl sideways across shelves or bend awkwardly toward the nearest window. One of the most unexpected yet clever solutions I've discovered came from a trip to Dollar Tree years ago, when I grabbed a simple toilet plunger, not for cleaning, but for gardening. Beneath the rubber cup is a surprisingly sturdy handle, perfectly sized for medium houseplants that crave vertical support. After removing the base, I wrapped the handle in a soft jute rope and secured it at both ends. That rough, natural texture mimics the feel of tree bark, giving aerial roots something to grasp. You'd be surprised how quickly plants respond when they're given a stable path upward. Their leaves often grow larger, and their overall shape becomes more balanced. I once gifted one of these homemade support poles to a dear friend in her 70s, who had a trailing pothos that kept sliding off her bookshelf. She'd spent money on flimsy store-bought poles that never quite lasted. When she tried this inexpensive DIY version, her plant perked right up within weeks. The vines wrapped naturally, and the leaves faced the window instead of the floor. She told me it reminded her of the way her own life felt steadier when she had something firm to lean on, a sentiment that made the whole project feel even more meaningful. So, if your vining plants seem restless this season, a humble plunger handle might be the quiet hero they've been waiting for. When winter nudges all our outdoor plants back inside, something funny happens. Suddenly, every pot becomes part of the living room decor. And if you're like me, those faded nursery pots and mismatched containers tend to look a little out of place against cozy winter colors and warm lamplight. That's where one of my favorite cold season tricks comes in, using Dollar Tree baskets as instant designer style pot covers. It may sound simple, but the difference it makes is remarkable. A textured laundry bin, a woven look plastic container, even a decorative wastebasket can turn into a beautiful planter cover with just a little paint. I often reach for a matte black or soft stone gray spray, because those shades make even the most ordinary basket look intentional and modern. Slip your existing pot right inside, and suddenly the plant feels like a styled accent rather than an afterthought. I still remember helping a neighbor, a retired teacher named Linda, refresh her sunroom one chilly December. She loved her plants, but felt embarrassed by the mix of cracked pots and faded containers. We spent a quiet afternoon painting a few Dollar Tree baskets she already had. And when the pots were tucked inside, her whole space looked newly renovated. Linda laughed and said it felt like giving her plants a little winter wardrobe upgrade, something cheerful to lift the spirits on darker days. Beyond the beauty, these covers add a layer of insulation, keeping roots safer from cold drafts near windows. It's a thoughtful, inexpensive way to give both your home and your plants a bit of winter comfort. One of winter's quietest plant problems doesn't come from the cold at all. It comes from the tiny flying visitors who suddenly appear the moment our homes warm up and our soil stays damp. Fungus gnats are harmless to us, but they can be relentless around houseplants in the colder months. Their favorite place to lay eggs is moist soil, and once they settle in, they reproduce faster than you'd expect. Instead of reaching for chemical sprays or pricey traps, Dollar Tree provides a wonderfully simple fix: bright yellow cards that lure these little pests like magnets. Gnats naturally gravitate to the color yellow, so attaching sticky traps to wooden craft sticks and tucking them just above the soil line works like a charm. And if your store doesn't have pre-made traps, a homemade version, just bright yellow cardstock covered with a thin layer of petroleum jelly, does the job beautifully. These tiny cards quietly catch the adult gnats before they can start a new cycle, keeping your soil and your home far more peaceful. I once visited a friend who couldn't understand why her kitchen suddenly felt like a tiny airport every evening. She blamed her fruit bowl, her drains, even her holiday wreath, until we finally realized her overwatered aloe was the culprit. After sliding a few DIY yellow traps into the pot, she called me 3 days later, amazed at how quickly the problem disappeared. Sometimes the solution isn't dramatic. It's just a clever color choice and $1's worth of supplies. By keeping these simple traps on hand, you give your plants and yourself a calmer, gnat-free winter season. As soon as the heater kicks on for the season, the air inside our homes becomes noticeably drier. You might feel it in your hands or your throat, and your plants feel it too, especially those delicate tropical varieties that are used to gentler, more humid surroundings. When you see crisping leaf edges or drooping new growth, the plant is often quietly asking for a little more moisture in the air. An easy and surprisingly charming fix is to turn clear Dollar Tree food containers or plastic cups into tiny humidity domes that act like miniature greenhouses. Just wash a clear container, poke a couple of tiny air holes near the top, and place it over a struggling plant or new cutting. The trapped humidity inside creates a soothing little bubble that protects fragile leaves from the harsh dryness of indoor heating. It's the same principle gardeners have used for centuries with glass cloches, simply adapted with modern affordable materials. A few winters back, I rescued a small Fittonia, a notoriously dramatic plant, from the discount shelf of a local store. It wilted at every slight temperature change. After placing a simple clamshell container over it, the plant transformed within days. The leaves perked up, new growth appeared, and it held on to that vigor all through January. That tiny dome did what weeks of watering never could. It created consistency. And sometimes, consistency is all a plant truly needs in winter. These homemade humidity covers cost next to nothing but the comfort they provide. Your plants is priceless during the coldest months of the year. Winter is my favorite season for propagation. There's something comforting about watching new roots form while the world outside rests. But if you've ever scattered jars of cuttings across a windowsill, you know how quickly the area can start to look cluttered. A simple solution lies right on the shelves at Dollar Tree sets of matching spice shakers or small glass vases. Their uniform shape and clear sides turn what might look like a collection of leftovers into an intentional, tidy little propagation garden. Once you remove the shaker tops and fill the vessels with fresh water, the narrow openings naturally hold each cutting upright. This stability is more important than it seems. A steady stem encourages stronger, straighter roots. Grouping the shakers on a small tray or decorative placemat not only keeps everything organized, but also creates a charming display that feels almost like a winter craft project. I once visited an older neighbor who proudly kept a lemon-lime pothos cutting from her late mother's plant. She wanted to propagate more, but every time she tried using mismatched jars, the sight bothered her enough that she hid them behind the toaster. After gifting her a matching set of Dollar Tree shakers arranged neatly on a small wooden tray, she placed the whole setup right in her kitchen window. A month later, she showed me the long white roots curling beautifully inside each glass. She said having that small, orderly station brought her more joy than she expected. It reminded her that even during cold seasons, something in her home was still quietly growing. These simple vessels prove that propagation doesn't have to be messy or unattractive. With just a few dollars, it can become a lovely part of your winter decor. One of the greatest winter threats to indoor plants isn't the cold, it's the quiet way moisture lingers in the soil. When sunlight is weak and temperatures stay low. Many of us unknowingly overwater during this season simply because it takes so much longer for pots to dry out. If your plant lives in a decorative pot without drainage, the risk of root rot rises dramatically. That's why a small bag of Dollar Tree pebbles or gravel can become an unexpected lifesaver. By adding an inch or two of stones to the bottom of a pot, you create a protective space where excess water can settle, keeping the root system safely elevated. This method isn't meant to replace true drainage holes, but it does add an important buffer, something especially helpful for winter, when plants sip water more slowly. I learned this lesson years ago when a dear friend gifted me a beautiful ceramic pot that had no drainage at all. I didn't want to drill into such a lovely piece, so a layer of Dollar Tree river stones became the compromise. My philodendron lived happily in that pot for years, and every winter I gently tilt it to check the gravel layer. Sure enough, a bit of extra water always collected there, quietly doing its job of protecting those sensitive roots. What I love most about this hack is that it gives you permission to use the pretty pots you already have, without sacrificing plant health. For just a couple of dollars, you gain peace of mind, and your plants gain a safer home for the long winter ahead. As winter settles in and our plants move permanently onto tabletops, bookshelves, and window ledges, we suddenly become more aware of just how fragile our furniture really is. A single overwatered pot can leave behind a ring, a stain, or even a small warp in the wood, a heartbreak for anyone who treasures their home as much as their garden. Thankfully, Dollar Tree offers a wonderfully simple way to protect these surfaces while still keeping your indoor jungle beautiful decorative placemats, cork trivets, and vinyl liners that act as stylish plant mats. Placing a mat beneath each plant does more than guard against moisture. It creates a sense of intention, almost like giving your plant a little stage of its own. A cork trivet adds warmth and texture, while a wipeable vinyl placemat offers full waterproof security. For grouped plants, a larger tray or a cut piece of shelf liner turns a messy cluster into a tidy display that actually enhances your decor. I once helped a neighbor named Carl reorganize the plant nook he kept near his reading chair. He was proud of his African violets, but frustrated by the tiny soil spills and water rings that kept appearing on the old oak side table he inherited from his father. We placed a deep green vinyl mat under his collection, trimmed neatly to size. Not only did the table stay spotless that winter, but the soft color also highlighted the violet's blooms, making the whole corner feel intentional and serene. Carl told me later that it became his favorite spot in the house. A small mat may seem insignificant, but in winter, when plants live closer to us and our furniture, it becomes both a shield and a subtle touch of beauty. When November arrives and daylight shrinks to just a thin ribbon each afternoon, every little bit of light becomes precious for the plants we keep indoors. What many people don't realize is that a quiet enemy builds up on the leaves all season-long dust. It settles slowly, almost invisibly, creating a dull film that blocks the already limited sunlight your plants depend on. One of the easiest and most overlooked winter plant hacks is simply wiping those leaves clean with a soft Dollar Tree microfiber glove or cloth, a gentle act that feels almost like tucking someone in on a cold night. The process doesn't need to be rushed or complicated. Support each leaf from beneath with one hand, and with the other, use the cloth to glide across the surface, lifting away weeks of dust in seconds. Many store-bought leaf shine sprays leave residues that can clog pores or attract more grime, but a simple damp microfiber cloth keeps things clean and natural. During winter, this can make the difference between a plant that merely survives and one that continues to grow. I once helped a friend who kept a beautiful but struggling rubber plant in her living room. It sat beside a window, yet the leaves looked dull and tired. She assumed the problem was lack of fertilizer or weak winter sun. When I gently wiped one leaf, half the surface instantly restored its deep, reflective green. Her jaw dropped when she saw the contrast. She spent that whole afternoon slowly cleaning each leaf, saying it felt therapeutic, like reconnecting with something she'd taken for granted. That's the quiet beauty of this hack. A simple, inexpensive cloth and a few minutes of care can revive the spirit of your plants during the dimmest months of the year. Working with soil indoors during the winter months can feel like trying to bake a cake with oversized tools. Everything spills, everything scatters, and even the tidiest person ends up sweeping the floor. When the weather pushes all your gardening activities inside, using large trowels or gardening shovels becomes impractical. What you really need is something sized for small pots and precise movements. That's why Dollar Tree's inexpensive scoops, plastic serving spoons, and even cut-down plastic cups feel like a small miracle for winter plant care. These tools let you guide soil exactly where it needs to go, around roots into tight corners, or beneath delicate stems without leaving a trail on your kitchen counter. A plastic scoop in particular offers a deep, smooth shape ideal for transferring even large amounts of potting mix, gently and cleanly. You'd be surprised at how much calmer repotting feels when the tools match the scale of the job. I remember visiting a retired nurse named Ruth one snowy afternoon as she was repotting a small fern in her dining room. She was using a full-sized garden trowel, and soil was tumbling everywhere. When I handed her a simple Dollar Tree scoop, She chuckled and said it felt like switching from boxing gloves to bare hands. Finally, she could maneuver with accuracy. She finished the job in minutes, hardly spilling a crumb. A week later, she told me she now keeps multiple scoops around the house because winter gardening requires a softer touch. These tiny tools may not look like much, but they make winter plant care smoother, cleaner, and far more enjoyable. Exactly the kind of quiet convenience we appreciate most when the world outside is cold and still. There's something wonderfully comforting about tending to an indoor herb garden when winter settles in. While the world outside turns gray and quiet, those little pots of rosemary, thyme, and basil keep a bit of life and fragrance close at hand. But as the collection grows, it's easy to forget which sprig is which, especially when holiday cooking has you dashing between recipes. A charming way to bring both order and warmth to your kitchen windowsill is by crafting simple herb markers using Dollar Tree chalkboard tags, wooden stakes, or even small holiday ornaments with flat sides perfect for writing. By labeling each herb clearly, you not only prevent mix-ups, but also add a little decorative cheer to the space. Chalkboards lend a rustic farmhouse touch, while painted wooden stakes feel cozy and handmade. I've even seen people add gentle humor, calling mint merriment, or sage wisdom, turning the markers into tiny moments of joy during the darker months of the year. And because all the supplies cost so little, you can easily switch them out for new themes as winter holidays come and go. A few years ago, I helped my neighbor Diane, who loved growing herbs but struggled with low winter light, reorganize her indoor garden for the season. She admitted she kept mixing up her thyme and oregano, especially when she was tired in the evenings. We made a few simple chalkboard markers together, adding little stars and swirls for decoration. The next morning, she told me she felt like she had stepped into a charming cottage kitchen instead of her own apartment. It wasn't just easier, it made her space feel like a warm retreat from the cold outside. These tiny markers may seem small, but they help bring clarity, personality, and a touch of holiday spirit to the heart of your home during the winter season. When nighttime temperatures fall and the cold presses in around window frames, our indoor plants face a kind of silent danger: chilled roots. Most houseplants are tropical by nature, and their roots simply aren't built for sudden cold snaps. Even a mild draft creeping through an old window can stunt their growth or cause leaves to yellow. One of the smartest, most affordable winter hacks I ever learned involves something as humble as a Dollar Tree Mylar emergency blanket. Though originally made for hikers and campers, this thin, reflective material works wonderfully to shield plant roots from icy surfaces in the home. By cutting the Mylar into strips or squares, you can line the windowsill where your plants rest or gently wrap it around chilly pots. The blanket reflects warmth back toward the root zone, instead of letting it dissipate into the cold glass. I once used this technique for a fiddle leaf fig that sat near a beautiful but drafty old window. Before adding the Mylar layer, the plant would wilt slightly every morning. After just a few nights on its reflective insulating pad, the leaves perked up and held steady through the entire winter. A retired veteran in my neighborhood once shared a similar story. He wrapped the sides of his potted citrus tree with foil during a surprise cold snap, hoping to buy it a little time until the heater caught up. That improvised layer kept the pot just warm enough for the roots to avoid damage. He liked the trick so much that he used it every winter after that, saying it made him feel like he was giving the plant a warm jacket. This simple barrier costs almost nothing, but for plants sitting close to cold windows, it can make the difference between barely surviving and gently thriving through the coldest months. As we move deeper into winter, the sun sits lower in the sky, and its rays enter our homes at a softer, narrower angle. Even plants placed right against a window can struggle to receive enough daylight to stay strong and vibrant. While grow lights are useful, not everyone wants to invest in extra equipment or deal with cords. and the added electricity costs. That's why one of my favorite winter hacks is creating simple light reflectors using Dollar Tree foam boards wrapped in aluminum foil. This quiet little trick bounces whatever sunlight does enter the room back toward your plants, almost doubling what they receive without spending more than a couple of dollars. The process is straightforward. Take a lightweight foam board cover one side with foil and position it behind or beside your plant so it reflects the available light onto its leaves. You don't need to aim for perfection. Even a gently angled board works beautifully. During the darkest stretch of winter a few years ago, I used these reflectors for my prayer plant, which had started stretching and fading because the sun barely reached its corner of the living room. Within 2 weeks of adding a reflector, the leaves returned to their deeper greens and reds, and new growth appeared right on schedule. I also remember helping an older gentleman named Mr. Howard who grew tomatoes indoors each winter as a personal tradition. His small apartment didn't get much sunlight, and he worried that his plants would grow spindly. After placing 2 foil-covered boards around his pots, he called me laughing days later, saying his tomatoes were acting like they were at the beach. Sometimes, the smallest addition can unlock the light your plants have been missing. Reflectors may not replace the sun, but they make the most of every winter ray, an inexpensive gesture with surprisingly generous results. Winter watering is a delicate balance, and many of us have learned the hard way that our usual outdoor watering cans can be far too clumsy for indoor plant care. A wide spout pours too fast splashes soil and can quickly flood a pot that only needed a sip. That's why I always keep a Dollar Tree squeeze bottle or narrow spout watering bottle close at hand during the cold months. These small containers give you the kind of gentle, precise control that winter plants need, almost like using a fine brush instead of a roller. With a simple squeeze, you can direct water exactly where you want it along the edge of a pot, at the base of a stem, or into a tight corner without disturbing the soil. This is especially helpful for plants that don't like water sitting on their leaves, or crowns, such as African violets or certain succulents. A squeeze bottle also lets you water slowly, letting the soil absorb moisture evenly rather than pooling on top. I once helped a friend named Margaret, who kept her plants on a tiered shelf near the window. She loved them dearly, but dreaded watering day because she constantly spilled water onto the lower shelves. When I handed her a soft plastic squeeze bottle, she tilted her head and said it felt like something she would have used as a nurse years ago, controlled, simple and steady. The next week, she called to say she hadn't spilled a single drop. She said the bottle made her feel confident again, like she was caring for her plants with intention rather than rushing through the task. A small tool can change more than just the watering process. It can restore the calm, enjoyable ritual that winter plant care is meant to be. Winter is often when we discover that our indoor soil has grown tired. It becomes compacted, drains poorly, or simply looks lifeless after a long growing season. Most people assume they need to replace the entire potting mix, but refreshing what you already have is often enough and far more affordable. Dollar Tree carries small bags of perlite aquarium gravel and even basic, slow-release fertilizer pellets that can breathe life back into soil that's lost its spark. Mixing a handful of these ingredients into the top few inches of your potting mix improves airflow, encourages better moisture movement, and gently replenishes nutrients without overwhelming your plant during its slower winter rhythm. I remember helping an older couple who kept a beloved monstera for nearly 15 years. Each winter its leaves would yellow a little, and they assumed age was to blame. When I showed them how to revive the soil by adding just a sprinkle of perlite and a light dusting of fertilizer beads, they were skeptical. It seemed too simple. But by the end of the season, the plant rewarded them with 2 large new leaves, its first winter growth in years. They joked that the plant must have felt like it had taken a deep breath after holding one in too long. The beauty of this hack lies in its gentleness. Your wintering plants don't need dramatic changes, just a quiet boost that helps them settle into the colder months with strength. And because these small add-ins cost so little, you can refresh multiple pots without stretching your budget. Sometimes giving your plants a healthier home is as easy as stirring in a handful of support, right where they need it. As we wrap up our quiet winter walk through these 15 gentle, budget-friendly plant hacks, I hope you feel a little lighter and a little more confident about caring for your indoor garden during the cold months ahead. Winter can sometimes make our homes feel dimmer, quieter, or even a bit lonely. But tending to living things reminds us that growth never truly stops. With just a few thoughtful touches and a handful of ideas from Dollar Tree, you can protect your plants, brighten your home, and bring a sense of calm purpose into the season. When I look back on the winters that felt the heaviest, it was often the smallest routines: dusting leaves, refreshing soil, or watching a new root grow in a glass jar that helped me feel grounded. Plants don't ask for perfection. They simply respond to kindness, steadiness, and the little adjustments we make for them. And in that way, they teach us something meaningful even in the coldest times. A little creativity and care can make life warmer. So I'd love to know, which of these 15 winter-saving tricks are you excited to try first? Maybe the wicks system that waters while you rest, the homemade humidity domes, or the foil reflectors that brighten even the darkest corner. Share the hack number that caught your eye and tell me how you plan to use it in your own cozy home. And if today's video brought you joy, clarity, or even one new idea worth trying, I hope you'll take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and join our growing community of gentle gardeners. We share new, comforting, practical home and garden ideas every week. Little sparks of inspiration to carry you through every season. Until next time, dear friend, may your home stay warm, your plants stay thriving, and your winter be filled with small moments of peace.